How many times have you brought your palm cross home on Palm Sunday, hung it on the wall, and by the next morning, it had already disappeared into the background? Just another object, part of the furniture, part of the forgetting. This year is different. This year, there's something you need to know before that Sunday arrives. Something Saint Teresa knew and lived by. Something that has everything to do with your home, with the people you love, with what is allowed through that front door, and what should never be. What is it that turns a woven palm cross into a true seal over a household? Or has it become nothing more than a beautiful custom that lost its power while no one was paying attention? That is not a small question, because there is an enormous difference between hanging a palm cross and actually sealing your home with it. A difference you can feel, a difference that changes what happens within those four walls. And most of us were never told. No one explained it to us. We received this tradition from our mothers, from our grandmothers, with love and with faith, but without the depth this practice has carried for centuries. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at your palm cross hanging on the wall and sensed that it was more than a tradition? That there was a spiritual weight to it you didn't quite know how to awaken? Leave your answer in the comments, because what you are about to hear was kept for those who feel exactly that. Every word that follows builds on the one before it. Not one is missing. There is a gesture Catholics all over the world repeat every year on Palm Sunday that very few truly understand in its fullness. Not because they are careless in their faith, not because they don't love Christ, but because no one ever stopped to explain what they are actually holding in their hands when they receive that palm at the church door, when they walk in procession, when they arrive home and look for the right place to hang it. It is an ancient gesture, a deep one, loaded with a theology the Church has guarded since Christianity's earliest centuries. And at the heart of that gesture is an object that is not merely decoration, not merely a keepsake, not merely a habit. It is the palm cross. To understand what Teresa knew about this object, we first have to understand where it comes from. The palms laid before Christ as he entered Jerusalem were not a festive decoration. They were a political and spiritual statement at the same time. In the ancient world, waving palms before someone was a proclamation of kingship, an act of homage, an acknowledgement of authority over the city, the people, the very lives of those who came out to meet him. The crowd that day was declaring Christ King with their own bodies, their own hands, the most solemn gesture their culture knew. And Christ entered, not on a war horse, but on a donkey, not with a sword, but with love. And those palms that welcomed him were marked forever by that encounter. The Church understood this from the very beginning, and when it began blessing palms in the Palm Sunday liturgy, it was not creating a new custom, it was preserving a living memory. The blessed palm is not a relic of the past, it is a sign of the present. It is the proclamation that Christ is King of this home, this family, this life. And when that palm is woven into the shape of a cross, something happens that goes beyond the skill of the hands that form it. Because the palm cross unites two moments that Catholic faith never separates. It joins the triumphal entry, the joy of the Hosanna, with Calvary, the silence of Good Friday. It binds the palm that hailed the King with the wood that held him in his total surrender. In that small woven object, the whole of Easter is present, the glory and the grief, the victory and the cost of that victory. And whoever holds it, carries it home, and places it at the threshold of their door is saying something without words that the powers of darkness understand perfectly. In this house, Christ is Lord. In this house, the cross is the only banner. Teresa of Avila knew this. She lived it in a way that even her Carmelite sisters took time to fully grasp. For Teresa, the cross was not an abstract symbol. It was a presence. an object that participated in the spiritual reality it represented, not through magic, not through superstition, but through the living faith of the one who held it, and through the grace of the Church that had consecrated it. In her writings, Teresa speaks of the cross with a familiarity that is striking, not as something venerated from a distance, but as something embraced, carried close, planted in the places where the soul needs protection. In the Carmel of Avila, Palm Sunday was not simply a liturgical celebration. It was the beginning of the most intense week of the spiritual year, the week when the veil between the visible world and the invisible grew thinner, when contemplative souls felt with greater force both the presence of God and the resistance of the enemy. And in that week, the palm cross was not hung carelessly. It was placed with prayer, with intention, with the gravity of someone who knows they are planting a flag on ground that needs to be defended. But there is something Teresa warned her sisters about, something that does not appear in popular devotional books, something that has to do with the difference between a gesture full of faith and one emptied of it. A cross in the home without consecration, without intention, without the prayer that clothes it with power, can be just a palm, just braided fiber, nothing weightier than its dry strands. And that warning, that distinction Teresa made with such clarity, is the one most of us never heard, the one no one passed on to us alongside the custom, the one that changes everything we thought we knew about what we carry home each Palm Sunday. Why did Teresa insist on that difference? What had she seen, what had she experienced in her own prayer life that led her to speak of the physical cross in the home with such urgency, such precision, leaving no room for vagueness? The answer is not in the palm. It is in what Teresa understood about the home itself, about what it means for a house to have an invisible door that can only be sealed from the inside. When the priest blesses the palms at the Palm Sunday Mass, he is not performing an empty ceremonial gesture. He is carrying out one of the most precise and weight-laden acts in the Catholic liturgy. The words he pronounces over those palms are not poetic or decorative. They are prayers of explicit protection, direct petitions to God that this object, this palm, this woven cross in the hands of the faithful, become a sacramental that carries the grace of Christ into the homes that receive it. The Church knows exactly what it is doing, and it has been doing it with the same conviction for centuries. A sacramental is not a sacrament. It is worth pausing here because this distinction is what shuts the door to any confusion with superstition. The sacraments confer grace by their very nature, instituted by Christ Himself. Sacramentals, by contrast, prepare the soul to receive grace, dispose the heart, create an opening for spiritual receptivity. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states this plainly. Sacramentals do not confer the grace of the Holy Spirit in the way that the sacraments do, but by the Church's prayer, they prepare us to receive grace and dispose us to cooperate with it. The Blessed Palm Cross is exactly that, a sacramental, an object the Church has closed with her prayer, her authority, her intercession before God, so that it may become an instrument of grace in the hands of those who receive it with faith. And here is what no one ever told you. What most people receive in silence, carry home in silence, and hang in silence. The blessing the priest pronounces over the palms explicitly asks that wherever that palm is placed, the home be brought under the protection of Christ. This is not a figure of speech. It is not pious language without real content. It is a concrete petition directed to the living God that awaits a concrete answer in the life of that family. In those walls, at that threshold through which the people you love pass every single day. The Church has always known this. The question is whether you did too. The tradition of bringing the Blessed Palm home and placing it in a position of honor, especially near the entrance, is ancient. In Catholic households across Europe, Latin America, and the oldest faith communities in the world, the palm cross at the threshold was something children grew up seeing from their earliest days. They didn't need a theological explanation because they breathed it in the atmosphere of their homes. They felt it in the way their mothers placed it, in the reverent silence of grandmothers who would sprinkle it with holy water before fixing it to the wall, in the care with which it was kept throughout the year until the following Ash Wednesday, when it was handed over to become the ash that would mark their foreheads. It was a living cycle, a theology embodied in the rhythm of the home. But there is something more in that cycle that is rarely mentioned. When last year's palm is brought to Ash Wednesday, it is not discarded as an object that has served its purpose. It is transformed. That same palm that guarded the home for a year, that stood at the threshold while the people you love came and went, that absorbed in its fibers the prayers and the tears and the joys of your family, becomes the ash that marks the foreheads of those same people. There is a spiritual continuity in that gesture that the modern world has quietly broken without quite realizing it. The palm does not end. It is transformed. And in that transformation, there is a lesson about death, about life, about the Passover that is about to begin. One that Teresa would have recognized immediately, because Teresa understood the cycles of liturgical time not as a succession of dates on a calendar, but as an ascending spiral of the soul toward God. Every Lent was a chance to go deeper. Every Holy Week was a real participation, not symbolic, in the Passion of Christ. And every Palm Sunday was the beginning of the week in which the contemplative soul needed to be most awake, most alert, most conscious of what was happening in the invisible space surrounding the visible space of the home. For her, receiving the palm and bringing it home was not simply a pious gesture. It was the beginning of an act of consecration that had to be completed with intention, with prayer, with the deliberate decision to plant the cross of Christ at the very heart of family life. And here, a question opens that has no easy answer. A question Teresa asked herself more than once and left floating in her writings without closing it entirely. What happens in a home where the palm cross is placed without intention, without prayer, without the conscious seal of whoever puts it there? What happens when the gesture is emptied of its spiritual content and only the form remains? Just the custom, just the dry palm on the wall. The cross is still a cross. The blessed palm still carries the church's blessing. But something does not happen. A door does not open. A grace waits to be received, and no hand reaches out to take it. And that, in the life of a Catholic household, has consequences you can feel, even if you cannot name them. That heaviness, that coolness, that nagging sense that something is missing, the one we mentioned at the beginning. Perhaps it was never just your imagination. There is an image in Teresa's interior castle that she builds with a precision that still, today, stops the breath of anyone who reads it slowly. The soul, says Teresa, is like a castle made of a single diamond, a castle with many rooms, many chambers, many doors, and at the center of that castle, in the deepest, most interior, most protected room dwells the King. Christ dwells there, and everything that takes place in the outer rooms, the corridors, the thresholds, the gates of that castle has to do with how near or how far the soul is from that center, where the presence of God burns without being consumed. What Teresa does not say explicitly, but what pulses beneath every page of the interior castle, is this: the castle of the soul and the house where the body lives are not separate spaces. They influence each other. They speak to each other. What happens within the walls of the physical home echoes in the walls of the interior home. And what is planted at the threshold of the house, what is placed at the entrance, what is fixed above the door through which the family comes and goes, is not indifferent to what happens in the deepest rooms of each member's soul. This is not a strange idea within Catholicism. It is an idea deeply embedded in its very nature. Catholicism has never separated body from soul, physical space from spiritual space, outward gesture from the interior reality that accompanies it. The sacraments themselves are the highest proof of this. Water that cleanses the soul, bread that nourishes the spirit, oil that heals the invisible through the visible. Matter matters, space matters, the threshold matters. And the threshold, in particular, has always carried a spiritual weight that every serious religious tradition has recognized. The threshold is the point of transition between outside and inside, between the world and the home, between the public and the sacred. In the Old Testament, God Himself commanded His people to mark the doorposts of their houses with the blood of the Lamb, so that the destroying angel would pass over them. That was not a sign for men. It was a sign for the spiritual forces moving through Egypt that night. And the marked threshold spoke a language those forces understood perfectly. Teresa understood this too, and when she spoke of spiritual combat, she did not speak in the abstract. She was not describing an invisible war taking place somewhere far away, with no connection to the kitchen, the bedroom, the hallway where the children play. She was describing a war waged in the concrete space of daily life, in the places where the soul is most unguarded because it is most distracted. The enemy, Teresa writes in the book of her life, does not sleep, he does not rest. He watches for the moment of least vigilance, the smallest crack, the most careless gesture, to enter where he should not be. And what does Teresa set against that reality? Not fear. Never fear. Teresa has a relationship with the devil that is, in a certain sense, almost dismissive. She fears him far less than she fears drifting away from God. What Teresa sets against the enemy is the cross, always the cross. It appears in her writings again and again as the one sign before which the enemy has no answer, no power, no entry. Not the cross as a decorative object, the cross as a living proclamation of who is Lord of that space, that soul, that home. And here is the tension that none of the sections before this one has resolved. Because if the cross is the true seal, if the cross is the banner before which the enemy retreats, then the question is not whether you have a palm cross on your wall. The question is whether that cross was planted as a seal or simply hung as a custom. Whether behind that gesture there was a conscious spiritual decision or only an inherited habit repeated without weight, without intention, without the interior fire that makes it real. Teresa lived this herself. There were nights in the Carmel when the spiritual disturbance was so tangible that the sisters felt it in the atmosphere, in their bodies, in the sleep that would not come. And on those nights, what Teresa did was not retreat. She planted the cross in the disturbed space with the same resolve as a soldier driving his flag into captured ground, not as a superstitious act, as an act of faith, as a proclamation of sovereignty, as the only language the enemy is bound to hear and respect. But what Teresa did on those nights, the precise gesture, the prayer that accompanied it, the way she moved through the spaces with the cross in her hand, that is something her sisters took time to fully understand. Because it does not begin with an outward gesture. It begins somewhere that has neither walls nor doors, yet is the true frontier of every home. And that place, that invisible boundary that determines whether the seal is real or just dry palm, is exactly what Teresa set down in writing with a clarity that cuts through the centuries. Saint Teresa wrote something in the book of her life that her contemporaries read with astonishment, and that today, centuries later, still has the power to stop the heart of anyone who encounters it for the first time. She wrote that the cross was her most constant companion, closer and more present than any human creature, that in her moments of greatest spiritual disturbance, deepest interior darkness, most ferocious assault by the enemy, the cross was not a symbol she looked at from a distance, but a refuge she entered, a fortress she put on like armor, a presence that never failed her even when everything else did. In her own words, Saint Teresa wrote in the book of her life, "I would take a cross in my hands, and it seemed to me that God gave me courage, and I was so transformed that I no longer seemed like myself, and I could have resisted all the demons." That sentence is not poetry, it is testimony. It is the account of a woman who experienced in a direct, physical, verifiable way the power of the cross held with faith in the hands of someone who truly believes in what they are holding. Not the cross's object, the cross inhabited by the faith of the one who takes it up. And this is precisely what Teresa was trying to pass on to her sisters when she spoke of protecting the home. She was not teaching them to hang crosses. She was teaching them to plant the cross with faith. She was teaching them that the outward gesture, however beautiful, however liturgically correct, does not carry the same weight without the interior disposition that sustains it. The Blessed Palm Cross carries the grace of the Church. That is real. That is a gift that does not depend on us. But there is a second layer, a dimension of power that is only activated when the person placing it at the threshold does so with awareness, with prayer, with the deliberate decision to say to Christ, "This house is yours, these walls are yours, this family stands under your cross." There was a night in the Carmel, recorded in the testimonies of her sisters, when one of the convent cells was suffering from a disturbance no one could explain. A discomfort that had nothing to do with the body, an unease that would not yield to ordinary prayer, a sense of presence that made rest impossible. Teresa entered that cell, not with fear, with the same calm she describes in her writings when facing the enemy, a serenity that comes not from the absence of fear, but from the presence of something far greater than fear. She took the cross. She moved through the space. She prayed in every corner. And she planted the cross at the threshold of that cell with a clarity of intention that her sisters later described as something you could feel in the air, like a change in the spiritual temperature of the room. That night, the disturbance ceased. Not gradually, it ceased. And what Teresa said to her sisters afterward was this: "The enemy does not fear objects. He fears the faith that holds them. He fears the cross proclaimed with the whole heart of someone who knows what they are doing and why. He fears the name of Christ, spoken not as a formula, but as love." And when those three elements unite, the blessed object, the conscious prayer, and the living faith of the one who seals, the result is not magic. It is grace. It is God's response to those who draw near to Him with an open heart and hands full of faith. The invisible door we spoke of earlier, the frontier that determines whether the seal is real or merely tradition, closes at exactly that moment. Not when the palm touches the wall, when the faith of the one placing it touches the heart of God. And that moment, that instant when the outward gesture and the interior decision unite in a single act of consecration, is what Teresa called planting the cross. Not decorating the house, planting it, the way you plant a flag, the way you plant a seed, with the certainty that what is set in that ground, under that protection, in that name, will not be easily uprooted. The home sealed with the palm cross, truly sealed, sealed with faith and prayer and conscious intention, is not a home immune to pain, illness, or loss. Teresa never promised that. Christian life does not promise that. What it promises is something else. That in that home, the Lord is present. That the forces working against the peace of that family will meet resistance. That the guardian angels have a visible sign, a recognizable banner, a clear point of reference that tells them this space has been consciously given to Christ. And that difference, though it cannot be seen with the eyes of the body, is felt over time in the peace that settles, in the clarity that returns where there was only confusion before. Now you know what Teresa knew. Now you understand why a palm cross is not the same as a palm cross sealed with faith. And now comes the question that everything before this has been preparing. How is it done? What is the gesture, the prayer, the path through the home that turns a blessed object into a true seal? Everything begins before you step into church that Sunday, before the priest blesses the palms, before the procession starts, before the Hosanna fills the nave. It begins at home on the morning of Palm Sunday, in the moment you wake up and know that this is not just any Sunday. It begins with an interior decision, what Teresa would call the disposition of the soul, the conscious openness to receive not merely a palm, but a grace, not merely a liturgical object, but a mission you carry back to your home when Mass is over. Teresa speaks in The Way of Perfection about the importance of intention in acts of devotion. Doing is not enough. You have to know why you are doing it. You have to enter the gesture with the eyes of the soul open, with a wakeful awareness of what you are asking for, what you are receiving, what you will carry afterward into the spaces where your family lives. An act of devotion performed without intention is like a seed thrown without soil. It may be a good seed, a blessed seed, but without receptive earth, it does not take root. And the receptive soil of a sacramental is always the conscious face of the one who receives it. So the first step is not a gesture, it is a prayer. It is pausing that morning before you leave the house and telling Christ, in silence or out loud, what you are about to do and why. Telling Him that the palm you are going to receive is not for you alone, it is for your home, for those who live in it, for the people who pass through that front door every day. Asking Him that the blessing the priest will pronounce over that palm may extend through your hands and your faith to every corner of the space He entrusted to your care. When you return from Mass with the palm cross in your hands, the moment of sealing the home begins at the threshold, not inside, at the threshold, because the threshold is the frontier. It is the point where outside and inside meet, where the decision is made about what enters and what does not. Pausing at that threshold before you go in and tracing the sign of the cross with the blessed palm over the doorframe is the first gesture of the seal. It is not an automatic act, it is a proclamation. It is saying with your body what your soul has already decided. This entrance stands under the cross of Christ. Then you step inside, and the sealing continues through the interior of the home with a logic Teresa would recognize immediately, from the threshold to the heart, from the outside to the center, from the doors and windows, the points of entry and exit, toward the most important place in the house, which in a Catholic home is where the sacred image stands, the crucifix, the corner of prayer where the family gathers before God. That is the heart of the home. That is the center of the castle. And the entire path of the seal, from the threshold to that center, traces the sovereignty of Christ over every space it passes through. In each room, the gesture is the same, the sign of the cross traced with the blessed palm over the doorframe, over the window if there is one, and a brief prayer that does not need to be long or elaborate to be real. It can be the Our Father. It can be an invocation to the Sacred Heart. It can be the simplest words the heart finds in that moment. Lord, this space is yours. This room stands under your cross. Let nothing that does not come from you find a way in here. Those words, spoken with faith, with the blessed palm in hand, with the conscious intention of someone who knows what they are doing, are the seal. The children's bedroom deserves particular care, not because it is more vulnerable than other spaces, but because it is the place where the soul is most unguarded, where sleep opens a door of stillness that in a consecrated home is watched over, and in a neglected one may not be. Teresa knew that the hours of sleep are not spiritually neutral. She knew that the soul remains active, receptive, open to influences that a distracted waking day does not always allow us to perceive. And in those hours, the cross above the bedroom threshold, the blessed palm fixed near where the little ones sleep, is a presence that watches over what the eyes of the body cannot see. The kitchen, where the life of the body is nourished, also enters the path. And the sitting room where the family gathers, where voices weave together, where bonds are formed and strengthened or quietly frayed. Every space receives the sign of the cross. Every space hears the brief prayer. Every space is marked with the same intention. Here Christ reigns. Here the cross is the banner. Here what enters and what remains is decided by Him. When the path is complete and you arrive at the center of the home, the sacred corner where you finally place the palm cross in its place of honor, the seal is done. Not by magic, not automatically, but in a living way, a conscious way. The only way Teresa would recognize as real, with faith, with prayer, with the deliberate surrender of that space to the one who is its true owner. And in that moment, something changes in the house. It is not always visible, not always felt immediately, but it happens. Grace makes no noise. It works in silence, like the seed beneath the earth, until one day you look at your home and sense that something is different, lighter, clearer, more at peace. There are families who have done this for generations, not with that name, not with that theological explanation, not with the precise words Teresa would use to describe it, but with the same intention, the same love, the same faith that turns a gesture into a seal. Grandmothers who moved through every room on Palm Sunday with the blessed palm in one hand and the rosary in the other, murmuring prayers that their grandchildren did not fully understand, but absorbed into memory with a depth that no intellectual explanation could have achieved. Mothers who taught their children to make the sign of the cross when passing beneath the palm, cross hanging at the entrance, not as superstition, but as a greeting to the Lord of the house, an acknowledgement of who the true owner of that space was. These families were not perfect. They had their sorrows, their illnesses, their losses, their stretches of darkness that no blessed palm spared them from. Teresa never promised a home without a cross to carry. What these families lived wasn't the absence of suffering, but something different, something deeper, a way of moving through suffering without being destroyed by it, a peace that did not depend on outward circumstances, a certainty that in that house, even when the wind was fierce, something had been planted that did not give way. And that did not come from the palm. It came from the faith the palm made visible. Teresa writes in the interior castle about the difference between the peace the world gives and the peace that Christ gives. The world's peace is fragile, she says. It depends on things going well, on health holding, on money stretching, on the people we love staying close. When any of those conditions breaks, the world's peace breaks with it. But the peace of Christ is another thing entirely. It is a peace that coexists with pain, that does not flee the storm, but remains at its center, that does not require everything to be right on the outside for something to be right on the inside. And that peace, says Teresa, can be inhabited. It can become a home. It can extend outward from the soul that receives it into the walls of the house where that soul lives. The palm cross at the threshold is not a charm that guarantees nothing bad will ever happen. Anyone who places it with that expectation is confusing faith with magic, and sooner or later that confusion leads to disappointment. The palm cross is a banner, and the difference between a charm and a banner is exactly the difference Teresa spent her entire life trying to teach her sisters. A charm works on its own, by its own force, regardless of who carries it. A banner proclaims something. It declares a loyalty. It makes a belonging visible. And that proclamation, that declaration, that visibility has real consequences in the space where it is planted. Not because the object holds power in itself, but because behind the object is a person who made a decision, who chose a Lord, who said with their gesture, "In this house, this is what we believe. In this house, under this cross, we live." There is something more that these families understood instinctively, something the modern world has been quietly forgetting. The palm cross in the home is not a private gesture. It is a public statement to the spiritual world. It is a sign not aimed at the neighbors or the passers-by. It is aimed at the invisible realities that surround every home, that are present in every space where human beings live and love and grieve and pray. And those realities, those guardian angels that Catholic faith recognizes as companions and protectors of every soul and every family, read that sign. They recognize it. And the way they respond to a home that has planted the cross in faith is different from the way they respond to a home where the cross hangs as decoration, nothing more. Teresa spoke of the angels with the same ease she spoke of her sisters in community. For her, the spiritual world was not a separate realm accessed only in moments of special prayer. It was the real world, the most real of all, the one that upholds the visible world from within. And in that real world, a cross planted with faith at the threshold of a home is a declaration of belonging that has concrete effects. Not always immediate, but traceable over time, in the accumulation of grace that a consecrated home receives when its inhabitants remain faithful to the decision they made. What truly transforms the home, the cross, or the one who holds it? That question has been open for several sections now, and Teresa's answer is not what most would expect. It is neither one in isolation. It is the union of both. It is the moment when the object blessed by the Church and the living faith of the one who places it meet in the same gesture, the same intention, the same act of surrender. When that happens, the result is not the sum of two elements. It is something new, something that can only be born from that union, and which Teresa knew by a very precise name, a name that changes the way we understand everything we have been talking about. The name Teresa used for that moment, for that union between outward gesture and interior decision, between the blessed object and the living faith that holds it, was consecration. Not in the technical, reserved sense of the Eucharistic sacrament. In the broader, more everyday, more accessible sense Teresa found in every act of conscious love directed toward God. To consecrate is to set something apart from ordinary use and place it in the service of what is sacred. To consecrate a home is to lift it deliberately out of the merely domestic and place it under the sovereignty of Christ. To say, this is not only my house, it is His house. I live in it, I care for it, I love it, but He is the true owner. Teresa did not understand the consecration of the home as a one-time event that happens and is done. She understood it as a continuing attitude, a disposition of heart that is renewed each time you pass under the threshold, each time you glance at the cross hanging on the wall, each time the family gathers in prayer at the center of that space. The palm cross is the visible sign of that attitude. It is the outward reminder of an interior decision that needs to be renewed, not because it wears out, but because the human heart needs visible signs to stay awake in the faith it has claimed. And here is where preparing for Palm Sunday takes on a depth that goes far beyond what the liturgical calendar suggests at the surface. Preparing for that Sunday is not simply a matter of planning which Mass to attend or remembering to bring the palm home. It is self-examination. It is asking honestly what state the interior castle Teresa describes is in, what condition the rooms of the soul are in before receiving the sign of divine protection. Because if there are neglected rooms, if there are chambers of the soul where the dust of unconfessed sin has been gathering for some time, if there are doors of the heart that have been left standing open to what should not enter, the palm cross at the front door does not substitute for cleansing the soul. It complements it. It points to it. It makes it more urgent. Teresa states this with a clarity that leaves no room for interpretation in the way of perfection. There is no use asking for outward protection while neglecting the interior fortress. There is no use sealing the walls of the home if the soul that inhabits it keeps open the very doors through which the enemy enters. The coherence between outer and inner is not optional in Teresa's spirituality. It is foundational. It is part of what makes the gesture real, what gives it weight, what turns tradition into living experience. And so genuine preparation for Palm Sunday includes confession. It includes examining the conscience with honesty, with that interior gaze Teresa called self-knowledge, which she considered the foundation of all authentic spiritual life. Not the self-knowledge that paralyzes with guilt, but the kind that liberates, illuminates, and allows you to see clearly what needs to be surrendered before you can receive. And when the soul arrives clean at that Sunday, having done the interior work that prepares the soil, the blessed palm received at church falls on fertile ground. The grace of the sacramental finds an interior home ready to receive it. And the seal planted at the threshold that day carries a different weight, a different depth, a different permanence. There is something more Teresa points to in her writings about the week before the Passion, something her Carmelite sisters lived with an intensity that few outside the convent walls could fully share. In that week, the veil grows thinner. The presence of the invisible becomes more perceptible. Contemplative souls feel it in prayer, in sleep, in the way ordinary reality seems to vibrate with something beyond itself. And that heightened awareness is not only a grace, it is also a warning. Because what becomes more perceptible in that week is not only the presence of God, it is also the activity of the enemy, who knows what is coming at Calvary, who remembers what happened at the empty tomb, who is aware of his own defeat and resists it with greater fury precisely in the days when Christ's victory draws nearest. In those days, having the home sealed is not a spiritual luxury. It is a necessity. It is the difference between walking through Holy Week with the peace of someone under protection and walking through it with the vulnerability of someone who left a door open without realizing it. And the seal that makes this possible, the palm cross placed with faith at the threshold that Sunday, is valid for the entire year. It does not expire at Easter. It does not run out at Pentecost. It remains as a living sign of the decision made that day until the following Palm Sunday brings the chance to renew it, to reaffirm it, to plant the banner again with the same intention, or with a deeper one, more mature, more seasoned by everything the past year has taught. The main thread we opened at the beginning is almost complete, almost. Because there is still the answer to the deepest question, the one that pulses beneath everything said so far. What happens at the most concrete and most real level when a home is truly sealed with the palm cross? What changes? What remains? What can be said with certainty? And what must be left in the respectful silence of mysteries only God knows fully? What changes in a home sealed with the palm cross cannot always be put into exact words. Teresa knew this, and precisely because of that, when she tried to explain it to her sisters, she did not reach for abstract theology. She reached for lived experience, for the concrete testimony, for the image that arrives at the heart before it passes through the mind. What changes, Teresa said, is the atmosphere, not the air, the spiritual atmosphere. That invisible fabric that wraps every space where human beings dwell, formed by what is thought, said, prayed, and loved within those walls, and which determines, in ways the eyes of the body do not perceive, but the soul senses clearly, whether that space is open to grace or closed to it. A home sealed with the palm cross, sealed with faith and prayer, and the conscious decision to give it to Christ, has a different atmosphere, not a perfect one. Not one immune to conflict, sadness, or the pain that life brings without asking, but different, with a capacity for recovery that unconsecrated homes do not possess in the same way, with a tendency to return to peace, to clarity, to tenderness among its members, a tendency that does not come from them alone, but from something that supports them both from without and from within, with a presence that cannot be seen but can be breathed, that visitors sometimes sense without being able to name it, that children who grow up in that space carry in their bodies and their souls long after they have left. Teresa lived this at the Carmel. Every convent she founded on her long journey across Spain was sealed in this way, not only with the liturgy of the opening Mass, not only with the formal official blessing that consecrated the space, also with that silent walk Teresa made through the corridors, the cells, the less visible corners, with the cross in her hand and prayer on her lips, planting in each space the sign of Christ's sovereignty. And the testimonies of the sisters who lived in those convents speak of a peace that was not ordinary, a peace that held, that remained even in the moments of greatest trial, greatest communal suffering, greatest assault on the whole community by the enemy. In her own words, Saint Teresa wrote in the interior castle, "Once the soul has reached this dwelling place, the Lord will not fail it if it does not fail him." Those words speak of the soul. But Teresa would have said the same of the home the soul consecrates. A home that has been given to Christ is not abandoned by Christ. It may be tested. It may pass through very long and very dark nights, but it is not abandoned. Because the cross planted at its threshold is a petition that God takes seriously. It is an invitation he accepts. It is a door that, once opened in that way, does not close on its own. And this is what truly transforms the home. Not the palm, not the priest's blessing, though that blessing is real and precious. Not the walk through the rooms, though that walk is the gesture that gives the seal its shape. What transforms the home is the living faith that holds all of it together. The faith that says, Christ is Lord of this space. The faith that renews that proclamation each time it passes under the threshold and sees the palm cross on the wall. The faith that teaches the children to make the sign of the cross when they come in, not as an automatic habit, but as a conscious greeting to the true owner of the house. That faith, that decision sustained over time, that daily faithfulness to what was promised on Palm Sunday, is what turns the home into a tabernacle, into a small, domestic, yet real and living space where the presence of Christ dwells in a particular way because he was invited in a particular way. Teresa had an image for this, scattered across several of her writings, and when gathered together, it produces something difficult to forget: the image of the home as an inn. Teresa spoke of the soul as an inn where Christ comes looking for lodging, where he knocks at the door and waits for someone to open it, where he does not enter by force, but only by invitation, and where, once inside, he does not behave as a passing guest, but as the owner he always was, bringing order, lighting up the dark corners, healing what was broken, filling with his presence every room he is permitted to enter. The palm cross at the threshold of the home is that invitation made visible. It is the outward sign that the door is open, that in this house, Christ does not need to knock twice, that here the Lord of life has a place, a name, a banner that proclaims him to everything visible and everything invisible. And that sign, small, made of woven palm, blessed by the Church and placed with faith by hands that know what they are doing, is enough, more than enough. Because behind it stands not the strength of the one who placed it. It stands the strength of the one who was proclaimed. It stands Christ. And that, as Teresa knew all her life, changes everything. You made it to the end, and that is no small thing. In a world that pulls you faster, that asks you to skip from one thing to the next without stopping, without going deep, you chose to stay. You chose to listen all the way through. And what you received was not information. It was something harder to find and harder to forget. an understanding that changes the way you do something you may have been doing for years without fully knowing what it meant. Now you know what the palm cross truly is. Not a piece of decoration, not an inherited custom repeated out of habit, but what it always was, a seal, a banner, a proclamation made of blessed palm and living faith that says to the visible world and the invisible alike, in this house, Christ is Lord. Now you know where that gesture comes from, what the church guards in the blessing the priest pronounces, what real power that object carries when it is received by someone who knows what they are holding. Now you know what Teresa knew, what she taught her sisters in the Carmel, not with abstract words but with concrete actions, with real nights, with the certainty of a woman who had experienced firsthand the difference between a cross that is hung and a cross that is planted. And now you also know how to do it. The path through the home, the prayer, the sequence of spaces, the conscious intention that turns an outward gesture into an interior seal, the preparation of the soul that makes the ground fertile for the grace of the sacramental. All of that you carry with you this Palm Sunday. And that Sunday, when you leave Mass with the palm cross in your hands and cross the threshold of your home, it will not be the same gesture as last year. It will be different, deeper, fuller, more real. Because behind it will be something that was not there before, an understanding Teresa would have recognized, an intention the Church has been waiting for centuries for her children to reclaim, a faith that says with a whole heart, "This house is yours, Lord. Come in, stay, reign." That is what you carry today. It is not a little thing. It is exactly what you came here to find. But there is something more I want to leave with you before you go on with your day. Something that touches what you have just received, and something you may not yet know you need to hear. Because what we have spoken about today, the home, the threshold, the protection planted in faith in the space where the family lives, touches something that goes deeper than the walls of any house. It touches a question many of us carry in silence, one we do not always dare to speak out loud, because it has to do with things that hurt, with things that no blessed palm and no outward gesture, however powerful, can resolve on its own. The question about those who are no longer with us, about those who once lived in that house and are gone, about those who slept under that same roof and one day did not wake up in it again, about those we loved and lost, whose absence is still felt in the corners of that home we have sealed with such faith. In the empty chair, in the object no one has moved because moving it would hurt too much, in the silence that falls at certain hours with its own particular shape and weight and name. What becomes of them? What happens to the souls of those we loved and who have gone? Are they still near? Do they hear us? Do they need something from us? Something we don't quite know how to give? Is there anything we can do from this side of the threshold for those who have already crossed to the other side? Teresa had answers to those questions. Not easy comfort or empty promises, but deep spiritual truth, rooted in the faith of the Church, sustained by the mystical experience of a woman who knew both sides of that threshold in ways very few saints have known. Answers that change the way you pray for the departed, the way you understand purgatory, the way you grasp what it means to remain in communion with those you no longer see, but who are still part of the same family, the same church, the same love that does not end simply because death has changed its form. Those answers are waiting. They are in a place that already exists, already prepared for you, thought out for those who made it this far, and who carry in their hearts not only the question about the home they live in, but also the question about those who can no longer be seen, but are still loved with an intensity that time does not diminish. That time, inexplicably and beautifully, sometimes only deepens. I won't tell you when. I won't tell you where. I will tell you this. When the screen shows you what comes next, when the next door appears before you, Trust that what lies behind it was prepared with the same care as what you have just heard, with the same voice, the same intention, the same certainty that what Teresa knew about the soul, about the home, about the living and the dead is not a treasure to be kept, but one to be given to those whose hearts are open enough to receive it. Yours is open. You proved that today by staying, by listening all the way to the end, by letting each word do its work in the place where true words always work, not in the mind, but at the center of the chest, in that place where faith and love and grief meet and produce something without an exact name, but that everyone who has ever felt it recognizes at once. That place is ready for what comes next. Leave it open. Don't close any door tonight. Let grace continue its work. Let Teresa continue speaking. Because what she still has to say to you is not exhausted in a single encounter. It never was. It never will be. And every time you return, every time you sit and listen, every time you let that voice from the 16th century speak to your 21st century heart, as though you have known each other your whole lives, you will receive something the world cannot give you, and no outward noise can take away. That is what waits on the other side of the next door. Don't miss it. Thank you for walking all the way here, for bringing your home, your family, your questions, your faith, for letting the words of a woman who lived 5 centuries ago touch something that belongs to you and belongs to today, something with no expiration date. This Palm Sunday, when you hold the palm cross in your hands, remember what you know now. You are not hanging a tradition. You are planting a banner. You are speaking a name over your home. You are saying with that small and enormous gesture all at once what Teresa said with her entire life. Lord, here I am. This house is yours. Those I love are yours. Put your cross at our threshold and let nothing that does not come from you find its way in. Saint Teresa wrote in the book of her life, "Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone is enough." May that certainty be yours this Palm Sunday. May it be yours every day of the year that follows. May the palm cross on your wall remind you of it each time you pass beneath it. And may the peace that Teresa knew, and the peace she could not keep for herself alone, because it was too great and too good not to give away, be the peace of your home, your family, your heart. God bless you. May Our Lady watch over you, and may Saint Teresa keep walking with you.